Talk to me, Phil.
Well, you know, all this discussion of the old days, it reminds me of my first job programming in a trading office. Things were so wild back then. I mean, people were cursing and there was porn everywhere and people were just constantly beating the walls. I mean, literally, we had a guy on retainer just to fix the walls every other day.
This is true.
I remember Constantine, yes.
Yes.
So this idea of bringing more women into trading, I want to see where this is going. I like the idea.
I could not agree more. Okay, Philip Smolen is the Chief Technology Officer and founder of Trade Ideas. He and I were the original two founders in 2003. But I got a pretty good story about Phil, and one of the first ways that I knew that Phil was special. So first of all, Philip and I grew up together. So it's a very unique opportunity for two people to be able to kind of start a business going all the way back to early childhood. In fact, so I don't think I even told anyone, I'm a Russian immigrant, so I'm Russian, still speak Russian, fluent Russian, and my family came here in 1979. And one of the first places that I went to was summer camp at the Jewish Community Center. And later on in life, when Phil and I became friends, Phil and I were looking through his childhood camp pictures, and we noticed, and this is totally true, I still kind of almost like get chills a little bit. I'm like on the upper right-hand side of like all the people, and Philip's on the lower right-hand side of the first camp I ever got to when I was in Houston, Texas. So we didn't even know each other then, but that's the first place
You
that...
still have that picture?
Somewhere, I do. So that's a little history, totally random, but kind of awesome. Phil and I went to school at Bel Air High School. That's where we became friends. We didn't know each other in middle school because he was in the school for the gifted. I didn't know that, but anyways, we were in some sort of a math class. And I don't remember if it was Algebra 2 or something, whatever math class that we were in. And that day we had a substitute teacher. Now I didn't know Phil at the time, but here's when I realized something weird was going on. All the Asian kids had got around this other kid and were trying to copy off of him. And I said to myself, what the hell is going on? So I kind of went over there and realized, you know, I'd positioned myself to cheat in a different area. I didn't know that where you needed to go was around this guy over there who I think wasn't really happy that everybody was cheating off of him, but was just sitting there doing his work. So that's how Philip and I met initially, and we became friends. And Phil and I then both went to University of Texas together. Phil, you studied computer science, and he has a master's. You got your bachelor's there, and then you got your master's.
Yes.
Where did you go to work after your master's in computer science?
Okay, well, actually, right after my bachelor's, I went off to Tracor. It's been renamed a few times. It's BAE Systems now, maybe.
But what's the field? What did you do
It was
there?
a defense contractor.
And what did they have you do?
Yeah, I was working on, I guess you'd call it some specialized database stuff. It was, there was some early visualization, data visualization before its time. So this system, it was all on like a VT100 or something, you know, the dumb terminal that
I have
knows.
no idea what he's talking about
The black
right now.
screen that does nothing smart, it just talks to another computer.
I know letters like TRS-80.
No,
VT100 is a little bit before my time or competence
in
level.
any case, yeah, one of my favorite parts about that, no one realized that you could use ASCII graphics to draw simple things on the screen. Like there's a dispenser that shoots chaff and flares out the back of an airplane, and the dispenser has a certain shape. You know, there's one here, one here, one here. And instead of describing it in words, I could actually draw a picture for people even with these simple tools.
Pause a minute there. So, do you guys see what I'm talking about? The missile defense systems, the real-time data in 1991, visualization tools, feels like at the apex of the stuff that you have to do with technology, because what happens when you get it wrong?
Oh yeah, well, they always said it was very serious. A lot of this was little black boxes that were on an airplane and a lot of defensive systems. And yeah, if you get it wrong, the pilot doesn't come home. So they were all very serious there.
So it was kind of, the reason why I wanted to get this on tape, because it's kind of an interesting history that our CTO of Trade Ideas, his whole background really, before it was popular or before anyone even knew about real-time data, one of the places where real-time data made a life or death difference is on the countermeasures of defensive systems. You have to know, you have to know where the plane is, the real-time communication with the satellite, right? And what's happening? Like when someone locks in on a plane, does your plane know that happens and then they
That's
deploy?
actually one of the last things I did at Tracor several years after what we were describing. It was, and one of the most fun things, it was a laser detection system. So yeah, it's very important. It says, hey, there's a laser pointed at you. It's coming from this direction. It's this strong. So yeah, it's definitely, that's one of the little warning lights that comes on.
Yeah. So, obviously, Phil has told me these stories all throughout his life. And when we started to do Trade Ideas in 2003, after getting our $50 million education, it was very clear that real-time data and the processing in real-time data, the expertise that Philip had in designing and working with these defensive systems, that background really lent itself a little bit to working with stock market data, because obviously I don't know exactly how you visualized it, but I knew that in much the same way that trades on the tape communicate the behavior of the stock, so does all of the information that you were working on back when you were doing that business. The two things came together. So when Phil was designing how we would start this alerting system, which is again exactly what you were in essence doing in defense, what did you think to yourself? What was the key to making it so that it could scale and so that it could succeed?
Oh my goodness. Can I back up a little bit first? You reminded me of some good thoughts. At Tracor, I think I had such good timing. I enjoy what I do. I have always liked computers. I played with them when I was very little, and it made an impact on me. It shaped me. So coming into that first job, well, I was the youngest person there by 10 years. I remember the guy who said I used to be the youngest.
Did I mention genius? We covered
And
that
I asked around. I enjoyed my computer science degree. I said, what's your degree in? Am I the only one? And this was the time when there were just so few, so many of the people there, they said, oh yeah, we had a computer at our school. So it was good timing with that. And again, I'd been playing with some of these simple systems. You can imagine when I was growing up, that's like the TI-99-4, the Apple II.
Sure.
And these were such simple systems. And in a way, it was better because you could really understand the entire thing. Now somebody comes in and tries to learn to program. There's so much stuff, and you never...
They never get underneath. Like, you had that base knowledge. And I kind of, what's funny, in our presentation, what we talked about Stephanie and the way she grew up and traded the game, you can't redo that experience.
No,
much the same way, your timing,
gone.
it's gone. Yeah. Now you have people coming into the space, they have to, like I said, they have to navigate all these layers, and it's almost like it's not tangible anymore. So I do think we have kind of like, who was that guy? Malcolm Gladwell talked about it's timing. A lot of the things that come to fruition, they not only happen because you put in the effort, but timing.
His books. Yes,
timing is everything.
Guy.
So let's kind of jump forward a little bit. One of the things that I've always loved you talking about, remember you and I had written, we had talked about, and then Philip wrote papers on how we're different than Twitter. Because again, as we jump forward, here you have this messaging company, and Twitter has, let's call it 400 million users all around the world, and all of these users are typing in messages, and Twitter is sending them to everybody in whatever ways that they need sending. What's the, again, how does Trade Ideas, or what we do, your architecture, how is it similar or different from what Twitter does?
Probably the biggest difference is that we have much bigger peaks. Twitter, they have people, as you say, all over the world, and it's kind of nice. It's no matter when and where you say something and one of your friends is out there. Our stuff, again, there's these, right at the open, there's this huge spike in data. and right at the close. And occasionally something else, a big news story breaks.
Sure.
And yeah, you really have to be more worried about the worst case rather than the average case.
Yeah, that's a
So
good
that's
example.
that's a big difference. When we compare the numbers, I say, yeah, they did this many in a day. That's more than we do in a day. But how many can they do in a second? So that's just where sometimes it's tough comparing the apples to the oranges.
Well, you had mentioned something before that I always liked, and I think you can articulate it really well. There's also the difference between the messaging, like what are we doing with these messages versus what's Twitter doing?
Oh yeah, well, what can you really subscribe to on Twitter? I guess you could do a full text search, but mostly when you're
I don't think I know how to do that.
maybe not, but you have very specific things like I want to follow these 3 people. Whereas in our system, it's just so customizable. You can say, I want this number over here times that number divided by something else. My goodness, we need to find some of those ridiculously huge formulas that are pages and pages that some of our customers have done and have that overlaid in front of our faces right now.
Let me ask you this. I mean, because, I'm trying to communicate this in a way that other people can understand, like, what's really cool about our technology. And tell me if I'm accurate, because, again, you're the technology guru. Imagine if on Twitter, and you're on it like a little bit, so you kind of at least know what it is. Phil's not with all that stuff, but you understand how it works, of course.
Basic idea.
Yeah, but on Twitter, like you said, I can follow you, I can follow anybody that I want to, and I get a stream. But what I can't do is I can't say, who I want to follow? I want to follow a guy or a person on Twitter who's just been increasing in followers over the last.
They have some of that, and that's where the difference is. There's like this stuff that runs sometimes overnight, and it's much more complicated. A lot of the big data they say they have is really those things where they're going to a presentation and want to say, here's our biggest increase comes from this, or a big advertiser says, I want to pay for something specific. Where we make that available to everybody. Everybody can make these complicated queries, and we can help them. I mean, I don't know of any other system. There's a lot of databases. You can always install MySQL and put in whatever query you want, but not everybody can do that. Where we've, I think, really bridged the gap. We've got the nice happy medium between an easy-to-use interface but a very powerful interface.
So let me ask you then, like, some broader technology questions. If someone's going to say, like, why is it difficult for a Bloomberg to do something like trade ideas? And we've dealt with Bloomberg before. What's the answer?
I almost shouted out while you were talking to Brad. I almost asked you a question. So you are right there with the customers. I'm kind of hiding behind you and Marissa and some other people. But you hear so many requests, so many ideas. How do you filter through those to decide which ones come to me?
Yeah.
And that's one of the problems with a company that gets bigger. We're a little more specialized than a Bloomberg, and we're always very careful. We are growing, but we're doing it very carefully. And that more than anything is, every little feature. Sure, you can do something. But how much is that going to cost me? Do I have to make sure that feature doesn't work when I add the next feature? So a little boutique thing like us versus a Bloomberg, it's a night and day.
It's hard for large companies to innovate, too. I mean, we've seen it over and over again. There's never been a shortage of people trying to replicate what we do and realizing that it's really not that easy.
You get back to even Tracor. Several times I said, I'd love to spend a little more time on this. I want to get ahead of the ball. Don't ask me later. That's part of the reason the schedules were always wrong. You try to do this big project all at once, and there was no money for R&D. It was just zero. At least in our department, there was none. And you really need to try stuff. And as a small company, everything is pretty much R&D. Something big like a Bloomberg, they have to decide, where do we put these funds? And there's so many people competing for it.
Yeah, no, there's no question. Let me ask you this. So a lot of people are interested about our stack. Mm-hmm. And people first ask me that, I'm like, are you pancakes or waffles?
Oh my goodness, you want to know what our stack is?
Well, it's not just about our stack, but people, I talk to people in the business space about what we're doing, and they're often like, are you using Oracle? Are you using Sybase? Everybody likes to throw just names
I hear
around.
that. I have to wonder if they really care what database or if that's just a good starting question. Maybe
I
that's
don't know
like, how's your
either.
day?
But so tell us about like how, because I already know, but I want you to be able to communicate. Like we created a lot of our own
Oh,
stuff
yeah.
because like
Well, it started out.
tell people about that. What do we have that nobody else has?
So it started out with, I guess, one major piece of our own software that's taking in all these market events. Somebody bought, somebody sold, somebody put out their intention to buy or
So
sell.
is that like an event handler or
All events, they're all coming in. Yeah, we're not, that's the difference. Overnight, you're in charge. You can say, run through this tape at whatever speed. But yes, we are reacting to events, and that's so much harder to deal with. So
there was nothing on the market for this. So you had to write this
yeah,
from scratch.
yeah, and it wasn't
for what
really,
we wanted to, for what we needed to do.
Sure, and it wasn't a huge problem. In fact, I'm glad you mentioned events. We had some experience doing the display that just shows you what's the current price of my 10 favorite stocks.
Sure.
And we reorganized that data, so we were taking in these small events and then putting out bigger events. Basically, our help is so long, I'm not going to list them all, but
13
basically,
years worth of help.
they should say, hey, look at this. That's what these things are saying. So we take events in and we put events out. So that was the first real custom piece of software. Of course, you told me, Philip, nobody can look at all this. This stream is too complicated, so we had to add some filtering and some control. And that's where the rest of the tool stack comes in. Our first version was a pretty simple lamp thing. I still love the Linux machines. Windows, if you need it on your desktop, but as little as I can in the server room.
I can imagine.
The MySQL, great general purpose database. We're kind of deviating a little bit now, but I'd still start with that. The Apache and the PHP, that's where we wrote the code that ran the website that it would filter through the data and say, what pieces do you want that's custom to you?
We were one of the first people that were actually streaming stuff on the web that way.
Oh my goodness, back then, I remember, now there's so many toolkits that let you send stuff to a web page. We were only in Explorer because at the time there weren't really cross-platform tools. And yeah, there were like 2 or 3 different ways, and we tried them. I think the first one mostly worked, but it didn't do good compression, so that could slow people down. We eventually started using more standard tools just to help us with all the edge cases. But yeah, absolutely, we were some of the first. It was so cool to know that you could make a web page change without the flash as you're
repainting.
Yeah, the flickering of basically someone hitting refresh over and over. We automated that, but that still wasn't as good as you could get.
Yeah.
There was all this technology that was just ready. They called it DHTML, dynamic HTML, that was just perfect for that need, but no one had done much with it yet.
We were way ahead of the curve for all that. It's kind of funny because, again, even though we were ahead of the curve, people still couldn't possibly appreciate it. But I certainly do. Let me ask you this. I mean, we've evolved so much since then. How were you able to keep building on the same architecture, whereas you see a lot of times people say, I've got to throw it away and redo it from
a lot of
scratch.
times I want to, but it's hard, especially our enterprise customers. It's very hard to go back to them and say, okay, we're ready for this whole new version. And well, first off, it would scare them. Who's going to test this whole new version? But there's the timing thing that, it sometimes takes months or years to make a significant change. Some of our stuff was a drop-in change, but not all of it. So yeah, in fact, we still get questions about APIs. Yes, we can support that. Look at our stuff from 5-10 years ago. I mean, the MedVeds, is their tool still available?
They're about
I know they have a new one.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
But that's the thing, that's been semi-abandoned, but I think people are still using it, so we can't go back to them and ask them to fix it.
Sure.
So yeah, that always slows you down, and it's almost an algebra problem in my mind. I know after the fact this is what I should have done, but looking up front and saying, I don't quite know what's going to change tomorrow, so I have to make it flexible enough, and I have to put it in. I'll throw out some buzzwords. We like XML because, and not all the fancy features, but this simple idea. Here's a list of fields. Here's a list of values. We have some new thing that we care about. Well, that's not a problem. We just add one more at the bottom. Some formats just aren't that flexible.
Yeah. So it's that, what I love about it, and again, one of the things I learned from Phil when we've been working together is release early and release often. Keep going. Continue to innovate. Phil, let's wrap it up by let me asking you this general question. Out of all of our technology, what are you the most proud of? Since again, you are really the brainchild.
There are so many pieces to it. The fact that it keeps running, I mean, that's tough. You know, that's something.
Let's cheers to
a
that.
lot of people
It still
don't
works.
think about it. You have an app. You're running Microsoft Word, and it crashes. Sure, you curse a little bit and you restart it. But everyone else in the world doesn't care. Something in our server room goes down, that could be a problem for everybody. So what you had mentioned about just keeping it alive and the fact that it still works, you know, the old stuff still works alongside the new stuff. There's so much good stuff that's on the development pipeline and stuff that's involved, and some of it's hiding. I think, well, one of the big pieces is just the fact that we've broken it up into small pieces that could be reused a lot. A lot of this older stuff we don't have to completely throw out because we're just using it in new ways and reconfiguring it.
All right, let me ask you one final question. Do you ever see your technology, like what we did on the data infrastructure side, the way we do the messaging and the redisplaying, could we possibly take that out of the financial market and put it somewhere else? Because people have asked us about that, and I think that's
possibly.
a big opportunity, maybe $1 billion opportunity.
It's something that we always look at and we always think about. There's a lot more competition in terms of these general tools. In fact, a lot of times when people give me advice, it's, have you seen this tool? Have you seen that tool? And there's just so many of them out there, and there's so much overlap, and you just got to pick something and go with it. So some of the big tools that we've got, there's a lot of little pieces, things that help you use threads right, things that help you send messages correctly. Very proud of that.
And it's all custom that you designed.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a tougher sell to people because it's
hard
a different.
To understand, right?
Yeah, that's the big thing. It's all under the hood. It's, you know, your wife comes out with the brownies, and you realize what measuring cup she's using. Yeah. Nobody understands that sort of stuff.
I want to leave people with this idea, and you tell me, because...
All right, there's a lot of the smaller pieces, as I said, things like how do you deal with lots of threads? How do you make it easy to get a bunch of requests at once and not fail and not go crazy because too many people hit you? But on the bigger scale, we have our own kind of application server. Something I say the best comparison would be Node.js. Ours has its advantages. A lot of people like the other one. It's got, well, all right, I'll throw out another buzzword just to make people look it up. Coroutines is one of the big differences. You can write something that looks more like normal code, but actually works well with event-generated code. You can say, start doing this, start doing this. Okay, now wake me up when the user comes or when something else happens.
Right.
So it's really helping. Event-driven code is harder than code where you're in charge.
Well, you know, now that Philip just said that, it reminded me of what I wanted to do as the finale of our interview, and which is this. People, think about this. If you're building a messaging system in a real-time data system, let's say you're even thinking about a Twitter, what real-time data stream in the world is more real-time and massive than the US stock market? You know, it's the most liquid, most unpredictable, you know, because the events, they don't happen in order. There's not a flow to it. They happen when they happen. And if you are the master of mastering real-time market data, I think you have a pretty big advantage to some of these other things that we could potentially port to. I mean, we've got that experience with the extreme cases. It seems like it's easier for us to kind of go into some of the others.
I think the 13 years of experience really shows how reliable we are, and that's one of the things, you know, anybody can say, hey, I built this new tool in 12 hours, whatever. But, you know, how often does it break? It's great for the customers who love it. but this will maybe lead us into bigger opportunities, maybe circling back to defense. They're always a little bit behind because they're very conservative. They have to see what tools work.
Again, I love that idea, and I think that's one of the big places that we will end up going into the future if we are not bought by somebody for billions of dollars, which is just taking our software out of fintech and exporting the messaging and event handling technology to all sorts of other industries, possibly real-time clinical trials, or like you said, defense, all sorts of things like that. All right, Phil, cheers to the future.